Persistent shame, guilt, and obligation. These are the emotions that drive our codependency. So last week I shared the 3 vows that codependents make in childhood. You can go ahead and check out that video here. And we discussed how shame, guilt, and obligation, these internalized emotions that were projected onto us, become the backbone of our codependency and keep us enchained and keep us really tightly fit into the codependent groove. And you'll know that you're fenced in because whenever you try to be different or choose differently, you start to come against that programming. You feel something inside that pulls you back down. And in this video, I want to argue that these 3 underlying emotions are also active in the codependent's sex life. So hello, welcome back. I'm Unique Val. I'm a trauma-informed certified intimacy coach, and I'm here to help you experience soul deep love. So this week, I really want to open up our conversation around sex and codependency, the impacts it may be having on you that you're not realizing, and also give you a little bit of a framework for how to start to unpack this. And so when we look at what's going on when we have codependency, this compulsion to please, to acquiesce, to caretake, there are 3 main layers to consider, which we have been covering in the Codependency Recovery series, this very playlist. You can tap the info card and check out the full list of videos. But you have these 3 layers. There's the layer of the core wound, and then you have the layer of the driving emotional force. So shame, guilt, obligation, those feelings that are compelling us, yanking on those puppet strings and really forcing us to act out the codependent impulses. And then you have the more surface layer. This is the actual behaviors, the way codependency shows up in our lives. And as we've discussed, that can look like a whole entire host of things. And that's why codependency is hard to catch or even define or classify, because it's really about that core wound and those driving emotional forces, because how it manifests is going to look differently, right? Depending on your socialization, your gender, your background, your religious upbringing, if you did or didn't, right? All of these things that make you you. Codependency is really that way of viewing relationships based on that very specific lens and way of being in your individual world, however that shows up. In other words, what codependency actually compels you to do, those actual surface layer behaviors, is going to be different for each of us. And so we've talked about there being a core wound, and there might be multiple, a triad, or, many branched core wound, but there's something that we're hungry for. There's something that we're hungry for, that we're trying to get out of the codependent behavior. And similarly, if I were to classify those driving emotional forces, like give them a hierarchy, I personally would say that shame is like the anchor. It's the underbelly. It's the sickening feeling, because oftentimes when we have that sense of guilt or obligation, we can do a lot on the surface, or, changing the way we view things, giving our minds new perspectives, and giving ourselves new examples of actually, we can use our rational brain of actually, I'm not necessarily responsible for that, I don't think, right? But it's the shame underneath that actually drives us to still feel codependent. Like, yeah, I mentally, logically know it's not my responsibility. I don't need to rescue. That person actually doesn't need me to come to their rescue in this moment. I can take my time or say no. I can assert my boundary, but as long as there's that shame, it's going to be very difficult to actually go ahead and set that boundary or state that preference, because that shame makes it very difficult for you to love yourself, to be right with you. And so if shame is the primary driving emotional force, that shame is going to make it very difficult for you to be your authentic self and actually even know what it is that you want when it comes to intimacy. And so if you're experiencing codependency, you may find that you often hide your preferences, you hide your true self. And of course, this is also combining in everything we have going on society-wise or wherever you live, right? So that's also layered into, is this even a safe place for me to be my authentic sexuality? Do I feel that I have that layer of safety to even do that? The reality is it isn't safe in every place. It isn't safe for all of us. We don't live in an ideal world. And even if you live somewhere where you don't feel that political or legal pressure to hide, you may not feel like you have people who will accept you for who you are. And that's a really deep and intricate process when we're talking about healing codependency. If these are the challenges you're facing, it's going to look differently than someone who maybe, coming out of hiding for them actually allows them to find lots of spaces where they'll be welcomed. For you, it's going to be a more complex and an intricate process. The question may be, how can I carve out spaces where I can be more of me if I can't be all of me? And where are the spaces where I can actually channel my authentic sexuality into maybe creative energy or passions in other areas? There are options for you. I know it's not perfect, but this is kind of the work I like to do in coaching, is really taking into account everything that you are, where you are, and how can we still allow this most vital and precious aspect of you to flow. And so shame can drive the codependent to hide themselves. Usually in the context of codependency, that's because we are trying to please others. But if we also have that layer of lack of safety in our social environment or wherever we are, what country we are, then that shame is actually also keeping us safe. And so we want to basically parse those two out so that we can have safety without the shame. And yes, that is possible. It is possible to be in a very precarious situation and feel internally safe and express with a sense of resolve and peace and knowing who you personally are, even if you're not going to bring it to those who are not safe to hold that version of you. I hope that makes sense. I hope you can feel the balance in that. And so the shame can drive you to hide, and it can also drive us into escapism. And this is where I find codependents can get to a place where we feel we don't know what we want. We don't know who we are, because in order to escape the shame, we take on these other identities, these other beliefs, these other desires, those that we think will be accepted by others or not rock the boat. And so we essentially start to live a false self, a false identity. And we can get so good at this that we convince ourselves that it is our choice, but we don't realize there wasn't really a choice to begin with. On the level of your actual nervous system and your programming, that was the only choice that you could make to feel safe. Putting safe in quotations because, yes, it practically may have allowed you to be safe, especially, during childhood, teenage years. But as we grow into adulthood, we actually have more choice, but our programming hasn't caught up to that. We are still on the old version, the old programming. And we don't realize actually there's more room here. I can actually find communities that could accept me, but the programming is still active. So you probably aren't even picking up on that or able to think those thoughts. And so when we live this way, when we're escaping into the false identity, the false self, we can actually start to feel a little bit resentful of those who seem to be able to freely express themselves sexually, or just resentful and dislike physical intimacy, period. I actually recently watched Little Fires Everywhere. It has Kerry Washington, Reese Witherspoon. I think it might have been produced by Reese's, what is her production company? I think it's like Sunshine or Hello Sunshine. I can't remember. Something like that. And I just thought it was so fascinating. So you may not know me from way back. I've been doing intimacy coaching for about 6 or 7 years now. And my brand was Unique the P Queen. I'll censor it for YouTube. And it still is, but I'm finding my way to how do I want to deliver that to you. But what was really interesting is that the characters in that, I think it's also a book, but in the story, I was watching the TV show and the characters were reading the vagina monologues. And I actually have not read the vagina monologues. It actually reminded me that is still on my list of things to read. But what was really fascinating is that some of the women were very yes, there was why do we have to talk about the vaginas? And there's this one woman who is just, she hasn't had kids and she's trying to find her own connection to her body in a way that's outside of just childbearing, because she's had difficulties, or she's single and she's in a room full of moms. And so they have basically, in her mind, achieved what society wants women to achieve with their vaginas. And so she's finding this new way of connecting to her body. And it's very, very reminiscent of how I resolved my own shame and reconnected with my own body, learning to do a lot of body meditations. And she's trying to introduce this to women who actually went out and achieved what their vaginas are quote unquote supposed to achieve, had families. But for many of these women, or at least the two main characters, what are their names? I just know it's the characters that are played by Kerry and Reese. These two women are living these kind of parallel lives where they actually had the experience of basically their vaginas being purchased. Carrie's character to be a surrogate mom, and Reese essentially purchased by her family. Those were the expectations that were put on her. You would go to school, but you'd come back home and you would take on the family home. You would have this many kids and you would do this. It's like her vagina was essentially purchased as well. And so as they're listening to this friend who proposed, let's read the vagina monologues, let's consciously connect to our vaginas and have this beautiful experience, have this relationship with it that's outside of the patriarchy, outside of the vagina's supposed function. They're approaching this conversation with this level of resentment. You can feel it. It's like, like I've already done the thing. And it's almost like this, it's just so fascinating to me because, and I would say Carrie's character actually does understand where the vagina monologues lady is coming from, but she's playing a manipulative game and is like, I'm going to side with Reese's character. And if you watch the show, you know why. She's trying to play the manipulative game so that her family stays safe. But I do find it fascinating that they both have a level of resentment towards physical intimacy in this way, because it was essentially stolen from them because they were purchased to play a specific role. And I think that's so important, especially for women who are experiencing codependency and all genders. If you have been assigned a specific role that you're supposed to play through your sexual expression, through your sexuality, through your sex, then it makes sense that you start to resent this part of you. And even those who are expressing freely become like an annoyance. It sounds annoying to hear that, because this relationship that you have with your sex is one of obligation. one of guilt, one of shame, one of this is what I have to do. Remember those 3 vows? This is what I have to do, I need to do, I should do. And if that is what's the dominant relationship that you have with your sexuality, it's going to be, it just makes sense that you're going to feel resentful because it's part of the machine. It's part of, it's part of the cage. It's part of what's entrapping you. And so when we talk about women, especially performing, faking their orgasm and performing sexuality, I think we have to realize there's a real reason for that. And it's not so simple as just be yourself. Right? If you've been following the series and even in this intro for this video, there are these driving forces, and women are very much socialized to be codependent. There are these driving emotional forces inside. We internalize the patriarchy, we internalize the abuse, and we take on that programming. No one needs to tell us, right? This is the mastery of it all, is that no one even needs to sit around telling women, do this, don't do this, don't do that, because it's already encoded within. And the actual emotional encoding forms the prison cell, and it makes it very difficult. So if you're someone who's feeling stuck in the performance of it all, I want to let you know that is a difficult thing to get out of. It is difficult. It is hard. Be gentle with yourself and don't feel like you now need to go on and perform liberation, because that is not correct either, right? We can take our codependent programming and then go apply it to our sexual liberation journey or sexual awakening journey. So be mindful of that. Take it slow. Stick with me. I want to help you. And I actually want to wrap this video up because I'm trying to get better at doing shorter bite-sized videos, 10 to 15 minutes that you can put on, get your information, then come on into Soul Deep Lovers Club. Oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you. If you want to stick with me, journey with me, I've created a membership. It's called Soul Deep Lovers Club. And that's where we take the weekly videos for right here on YouTube, and I actually give you a practice, or you have an invitation to come to a live healing session. This is bi-weekly. We do those every other week, and then on the off week I'll give you a self-practice. And so we have another practice this week that goes along with this very video. I'll share a little bit on the practice in just a bit, but I want to wrap up this conversation because this video is getting kind of long, and so we're going to need to break this conversation up over the next few weeks. But coming back to those 3 layers of codependency, right? So the core wound, the driving emotional forces, and then we've got how it's manifesting, the behaviors, the traits, the actions. If shame is the underbelly, it is actually performing a function, right? So we've been talking about how shame is impacting your sexuality. And so if shame is a function, if it's a driving force, it's there because it's actually trying to assist and help you get that which you're deeply hungry for. The shame is actually existing as a force to try to get you what you're hungry for, what's underneath the core wound. And so what this means is that our nervous system is often unconsciously, we're not doing this consciously, we are often sneakily trying to get our needs met, the need that we feel we can't actually authentically receive. And it's doing it in such a roundabout way. And so what happens in our sex lives is we can form a little bit of an equation. So we say, okay, if I do this, then will I get this? I'm doing this so I can get this. This is what is at the center of the core wound. This is what my soul, me, this is what I'm deeply hungry for. This is what's been missing. Is maybe it's love, maybe it's nurturing, maybe it's commitment, loyalty, safety, whatever that need is, right? So I'm trying to reverse engineer it I'm trying to do this so I can get that. But I don't consciously know that. This is me telling you what's happening now. So if you didn't know, this is what's going on. But this is what the codependent brain does. It's like, if I can do this, then I'll get that. And that means that your sex life becomes a form of bartering. You have a bartering system going on. It feels like you're just doing a series of trade-offs. So if I please my partner in this specific way that they want, then will they love me? They should stay. If I'm doing this calculation correctly, if I do this, then they should do this. They'll stay. If I perform my sexuality in this way, then they'll stay, or they'll love me, they'll nurture me, they'll shower me with gifts, whatever it is. But this can also take a different turn where we say, okay, maybe if I don't do this, if I withhold intimacy, if I withhold a certain desire, if I just dangle it, then maybe it'll keep them hooked and they'll stay. And I want to point this out because we can internally know the performance is painful. The shame-driven performance is painful. It leads to confusion. It leads to alienation from the self, inability to know one's self, know one's true desire. But it's also painful for the other person on the other side. Because while this bartering to you, while done often unconsciously, is almost like your inner child's innocent play at getting what they desire, which is love, which is nurturing, which is safety in relationship, which is security, right? It's almost like an innocent play at trying to get those needs. But the reality of it is a form of manipulation. We're trying to manipulate the circumstances, the situation, so that our needs are met. And this is why we cannot authentically connect if that codependent programming is still active within us. Not only are we not showing up authentically, but our motivations are clouded. Our love is becoming muddy and murky. And that is not to layer on any additional shame or guilt. It's just an awareness and perhaps an invitation to transform and transmute that which is not serving your desire to experience soul deep love. And I'm not going to just leave it there. Like, oh yeah, that sounds really deep and heavy, and go figure it out yourself. So if you'd like to take that invitation, if you would like to transmute and shift this way of being, I invite you to come into Soul Deep Lovers Club. This week, we're going to be tending to our sensual garden. This is a practice of finally being honest about what we're carrying around sex, intimacy, love, physical touch, our sexualities, our sexual identities. Finally allow ourselves to just see, what is it that I really actually feel? This is a practice that I invite you to do with your partner if you have one, or partners. So it's appropriate for singles, couples, and multitudes. If you'd like to get that practice, it's a wonderful date night idea, then come on into Soul Deep Lovers Club and get this week's practice so that you can finally exit the performance and come out of hiding. And if you would like to go deeper with me, I am offering private coaching. Simply email me at unique@uniquebell.com and I'll get you set up with a free 40-minute breakthrough session where we'll peep under the hood together, get to the core of your desire for your relationships in your life right now, and I'll offer you a coaching roadmap to get you there. Alrighty, so again, come and join us in Soul Deep Lovers Club. It's only $12 a month, and I think for the value that you're getting, that is almost highway robbery. That is incredible. Our motto in Soul Deep Lovers Club is just one step at a time. So week by week by week, chipping away at this, week by week by week, you'll get a practice. And I try to keep them deep but succinct so that it's not taking over your entire life, because you just need to take one healing step at a time. And I promise it will grow. The momentum will grow. You'll feel the culmination of the work, and you'll start to see how it's like deeply embedded into every area of your life. And it's just remarkable. Just take one step at a time with us each week. So come on into Soul Deep Lovers Club. I'll leave the link below. Again, it's only $12 a month, and this is the final week to claim the birthday bonuses because it's my birthday month. So I've added some additional bonuses to sweeten our new memberships. So not only is it the birth of Soul Deep Lovers Club, it's also the birth of the birth of me. So I've added some bonuses for you to enjoy. So come on in this week if you can, and hit subscribe, hit like, and if you'd like to go deeper with me, email me at unique@uniquebelle.com. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining me. And like I said, I want to continue this conversation next week because I want to discuss how our codependent black and white thinking can also affect how we view our sexuality and those of others. And this is something that I've actually run into in myself this year and had to reform my views because I was like, what is this? Why do I feel this way? So that's going to be a really interesting conversation. I hope you'll join me for that. And if you're looking for another video to watch, check out this one. It's going to pop on the screen in just a few seconds. Play the music. I'll see you next week.